and I'm one of the librarians, so I supervise a couple departments. One of the things I love to talk to people about is to get them thinking about things they already know, but to know how we discuss them and how we deal with them as librarians, and how it can translate to you as for preserving family material such as letters, photos, negatives, things like that. In the library world, we deal with a lot of standards and how we keep things, so I want to convey them to you and just know how you can do them, but also how you can do them with low to no cost. So I think that's really important too, because things can become very expensive when you deal with archival material and preservation and all that. So let's talk about some basics. This is Basics 101. When I was in library school, we talked about archival stuff, and we talked about theory till I fell asleep. Over and over again, theory, theory, theory. They wouldn't even let us touch anything. But since then, I've touched quite a bit of stuff, and one of the things to be familiar with is essential definitions of what we're talking about. So in archives is any records created or received by a person, a family, or an organization, preserved because of their continuing value. So value is important because we can't keep everything. You know, we can't keep, we don't have enough space or the time to deal with a lot of that stuff. So does it have value? Conservation, the repair or stabilization of materials through chemical or physical treatment. So conservation can be as easy as stabilizing this letter. This is in a PVC-free thing. It's actually from Office Max, just a page protector, but it is isolating the oxygen from the paper, and so it's sort of decreased the acidification that's happening with this paper, making it more brittle and basically deteriorating this. That's as easy as, you know, buying a page protector to keep it and moisture from and humidity from that material. So that's conservation. Preservation is protecting material by minimizing chemical and physical deterioration. Kind of the same thing. The difference between the two, it's easy to get them confused. When you think of repair, or like if you think of a painting that's being restored, that's conservation. But if you've arrested the process of age on something, you've conserved it. And so that leads into preservation. So they're kind of a fine line between the two. Restoration is also repairing an item. So if this letter was torn, I could maybe get some acid-free mulberry tape and tape the back where it's starting to tear, so that it can be looked at and preserved and read and handled to some extent. So there's some logical procedures that are standard for assessing any collection. So planning, and this is really important. It's a way to think about going about something and how you should handle it. So planning, maybe you have some material you'd like to save. How much material is there to work with? Are other people or organizations interested in the material? So my example, I had to go through my grandmother's house, which was technically my great-grandfather's house, and go through the attic, which hadn't been opened since like the 80s. I go in there, and it's me and my mother, and we're looking through stuff, and there's just so much stuff. So much we're trying to figure out, what is this? What can we save? What haven't the raccoons been in? What haven't the mice been in? What's been damaged? So some of the material I have here is actually from my family. So I was just grabbing stuff, and we're kind of figuring out, let's get it out of here. I mean, it's been in the attic where there's a couple things you need to think about where you store stuff. So humidity, fluctuation in temperatures, as well as pollutants. Pollutants can be, if you keep things in a garage, that would be smoke. That could be any type of weird chemicals that are there. It could be just the environment. It could be dust. But fluctuation in temperatures and humidity are really detrimental to everything. Photographs, paper, things like that. And then, so we were like, what do we have? I'm looking at pictures, I'm looking at negatives, I'm looking at certificates, I'm looking at, my great-grandfather showed chickens all over the country, so he had all these ribbons and awards and things. So if you look at it, what damage are you dealing with? Are you dealing with just organizing it, cleaning it up? Do you have a time frame to complete this project? You don't want something to be ongoing, especially if you've gotten a bunch of stuff at once. Now, if you're talking about maybe you just have family photos that you've had for a while, you've had a long time to think about this. But when you're thinking about whether digitizing or preserving it, you kind of want to do it in a time frame and then be done with it. The longer you extend working with something, you forget about things and you only get through most of it. It's always best to complete the project. Even if it's a tiny project or a larger project, you can break it up into pieces. Is it possible to organize this into groups? So, easiest thing, letters, photos, negatives, slides, ephemera. Ephemera is anything that's really meant to be thrown away. So here's an easy example of what some would consider ephemera. It's a yellowed newspaper clipping. This is about my great-grandmother. It says, Miss Leota Hayes is a guest at prenuptial linen shower here. They don't put stuff in the paper like that anymore. This is from Portsmouth, and it's from the 1940s. And it mentions a bunch of other names, but particularly they ripped this out because of my great-grandmother. She's mentioned in it. So a lot of times when you're dealing with like things that are cut out of paper, you're missing some of the context. So what's the paper? When did it come out? I don't have a year on this, but I can guess it was from the 40s based on when my great uncle was born, and I know it's from a Portsmouth paper. That's really all I know. It's actually in pretty good shape. It's pretty pliable. One thing about newspaper is it becomes yellow. That's because of the lignin in the paper, which is the tree pulp, the paper pulp, reacts to the environment, heat and humidity, and becomes brittle. One of the things people say, like, "Oh, I love the smell of the library and the old books." That smell. Well, that's the smell of the pages actually decaying. It's not a good smell. It is. That smell that you think of, oh, it's old books, musty books. Well, that's them breaking down. When if you have oxygen present, it oxidizes things, and with any moisture, that's all it takes for paper that has acid in it to break down. The good thing is, most paper nowadays, even copier paper, it's acid-free. Ever since the mid-90s, there's been ANSI standards that a lot of publishers have to work with. So whenever you buy a book, as long as it's not paperback, but a lot of paperbacks are acid-free paper. Hardcovers are acid-free, and they usually tell you that. Most everything you buy now is acid-free paper, which is awesome for preservation's sake. Once you get rid of that acid in paper, paper lasts for as long as it doesn't get torn up or wet. So in a dry environment, it's really good. So here is the next step, handling. Do you have consistent space set aside for working with this material? Are you prepared to dedicate time to making sure you're bless me, thank you. Prepared to dedicate the time to making sure you're careful with the material? Will you need help working with what you have? So the idea behind that is, if I have this table here, maybe this is my kitchen table, and I have stuff laid out on that. Every day I need to pick it up, and I need to put it away. The more you handle stuff, the more you are likely to damage it if it's fragile, or misplace it, or mix it up. So you need kind of a dedicated space. If you're going to take a week or a month or a year, make sure it's somewhere that you're not moving stuff around, shifting it, doing things like that. You really don't want to, especially if it's delicate stuff, you don't want to keep moving it and shuffling it. That opens things up to damage. Mechanical damage. Mechanical damage is where you would tear, or something hits it, or falls, or breaks. And will you need help? Sometimes you do need help working with stuff. So if you have a family member that can give you context of when photos were taken, letters were written, that's helpful, and they can also help you organize things. So digitizing would be the next step, and that's one thing the Media Center can help you with. We have tons of scanners, and for negatives, for slides, for all sizes of pictures and documents. So if you are interested in that, we can always talk about that. It doesn't have to be work related. So what's the best way to digitize this? So there's different types of scanners. There's auto document feeders, which are for non-delicate material. If you have pictures from like the 80s and 90s, we have a machine that you just put them in there and it will scan them very quickly. You can scan 100 in like 2 minutes, and it scans the back and the front. So if you wrote something on the back, it's always great to have digital copies of things, especially nowadays when most people don't look through photos. And I've helped plenty of people digitize those things. This is a hard thing to think about. Do you even need to digitize something? Do I need to digitize this letter that my great-grandfather wrote in 1945 to my great-grandmother? Do I need to digitize that? When I read the content, it really doesn't talk about anything, just where he's at. And his handwriting. I think it has intrinsic value with the handwriting and just what it says. I could digitize it if other family members were interested in it, but they're not, so I just have the original. I don't really need to digitize it. You don't need to digitize everything. The other thing is, if you digitize it, do you want to discard the originals? Is there value in that? So once I digitize these photos from a funeral, do I really need to keep these? You cannot keep everything. Even if you're the family archivist, do you really need to keep everything? Can you give it to someone else now that you've digitized it, or can you trash it? I know that's hard to think about, but we don't have all the space we need. If you're digitizing stuff, there should be a naming scheme as well as metadata or tags attached to something, because how else are you going to find it? You can group it into folders, but if you attach words to it like funeral or a black and white photo, or if there's a date somewhere or something written on the back, you might need to put that in the note of the digital file or something like that. And the final step is storage. So this is what we're already probably doing, but are we doing it correctly? What do I need to obtain to preserve this material properly? Where will this material be stored? Will I or someone else be the caretaker? That's kind of important. Are you going to pass this on to someone? Will I have a backup of the digital material? If you create digital copies of things, do you have a backup? What if you lose the hard drive or the disk that you've copied it on? You should have backups of that, just for redundancy's sake, because once you digitize something, you don't want to redigitize it if you've lost your digital copies. Here's a lovely pH scale. This is for paper. When you're dealing with paper, whether it's photographic paper, newspapers, letters, you're dealing with this continuum here. So acid-free paper has a pH of 7 or higher. That higher is to take into account something called an alkaline buffer. Alkaline buffer sort of neutralizes highly acidic paper like newspapers, and it's done by putting calcium carbonate into the paper. More alkaline stuff does not harm paper. Acidic stuff becomes brittle. So I believe this has somewhat of an alkaline buffer in there, so this may have a pH of 8 or 9. So this is meant for, we bought these for the library for a bunch of musical scores from like the 1800s, and that's why it's this strange size. This is an archival folder. You get maybe 50 of these for probably, probably $75. They get kind of expensive. This is a archival box that we use, and this is pretty standard in archives. Sometimes you see these on like crime shows where they're storing material. It's an acid-free box. It is reinforced, so it's not crushed, and these are about $20 to $30 a piece. Very expensive, and they're not, I don't have any of these at home. It's expensive. What I do is I go to Michael's when there's a sale, and those photo boxes with the magnetic clasp? I get those. Those are good. I think they're acid-free. I don't know, but really, what matters is if you're dealing with a lot of photos, what's touching the paper. So what you can do is, easiest thing, a lot of tissue paper nowadays, if you buy like pure white paper, tissue paper, it's acid-free. I line it, and I put stuff in there, and then I close it. As long as you're keeping it out of fluctuations in heat, usually normal, comfortable temperatures and humidity, it's good enough. Some people store stuff in like these Sterilite tubs. Problem with that is they're usually made with PVC, and the plastic, the esters of the plastic will. You ever take plastic and you feel it feels greasy? That's what happens, and it contaminates material. It's not the best thing to keep. It's not like destructive for a lot of things, but it will, over the long period of time, it will become brittle, break, and the material inside can spill out or become damaged. So just think of those. But I like to think of, I mean, these boxes, you don't have to spend a lot of money. The ones that you get, you know, at Michael's are perfectly fine. The plastic bins are okay, but I cheat and I use tissue paper to kind of line them. You don't have to, but that's me. You can also use just regular office paper to line them. Anything where you can separate it from that material. And of course, two of the worst places you can store material is your attic and your garage. So a lot of times when people store stuff in their garage, termites become a problem, mice become a problem, silverfish become a problem. So environment and degradation, it's kind of important. And I'm sure everybody knows this lovely little creature here. I actually think they're kind of cool. They have not evolved in millions of years, and they look like an alien, but they are not cool for paper. They love to nibble on paper, and that's what's happened here to this this certificate. If you notice, the edges are sort of chewed up and chipped. That's not because someone's handled it. It's because a little silverfish has decided to chew on it a little bit. The paper is brittle. It is yellowed. It is stiff. It is somewhat still pliable, but I could probably bend this and crack it. This is a certificate that was given to my great-grandmother in Portsmouth because she wanted to be a part-time salesperson for the Christmas season in 1953 to make some extra money. So she had to go through 10 hours of training to be a part-time assistant. They don't do that now. But this was the time where you did that. So we've had some humidity issues. We've had some, you can see where it's lighter and darker. That's where the silverfish have actually chewed on the surface of the paper. There's ink here, and there's ink contaminated there. But you can pretty much read this. And that's for 10 hours. She got a little blue seal. People have signed this. My great-grandmother did not sign this. This has been filled out for her so she could take it to, but this is the State Board of Education. This is where it's from. They don't do that anymore. It's pretty crazy. But this is damaged. So when you have something that's damaged, the best thing is to just be gentle with it. I'd put it in a page protector. But I like this one because it shows clear examples of what you could be dealing with. It's stiff, and I could snap it in half because it's so stiff. To be honest, I don't really need to keep that. I mean, it's great, but my great-grandmother never signed it. It's just something kind of fun as far as my family history. And I could make at some point, I might get rid of it. I don't know. I might scan it in, I might not. I think it's cool, but do I need to keep that? Do I really need to keep that? It doesn't take up that much space, so you also have to think about that. Do you have the space? Does it take up that much space? Here's something that I really shouldn't keep, but I do like it just to show people. This was in a pack of negatives and photos that I found. Silverfish have nibbled on it, but the cool thing is this is probably from the 50s and it hasn't really yellowed. It's a mimeographed little piece of paper, and it says, "Let Santa serve you now." And there's a little drawing of Santa, which I think is kind of cool. And it's about getting photo cards for Christmas. You're with your family on there. And it has prices. 25 cards with envelopes for $2.50, 100 for $7.50. And it says, it's from Macmillan's Ink, Quality Finishing. And they were located in Portsmouth. They're no longer in business, so that's kind of cool. We have some information there. So we have prices, we have a location, and we have this cool picture. So I just like that. I think it's kind of cool. And you can fold it. It's been folded several times, but it's still very pliable. So some paper will surprise you. I mean, it was kept in an attic and got nibbled on, but who'd have thought and that's called an ephemera. It's not really meant to be kept. It's meant to be tossed. Anything like envelopes are considered ephemera. Stickers, postcards are actually ephemera, but you may want to keep them because they have interesting stuff on them. This is a Christmas card that came from the Norfolk shipyard that was given to my great-grandfather because he worked there. But it's just a picture, and there's no, on the inside, It just says Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. There's no writing or anything, and it's gotten some humidity damage, moisture damage there. Fairly pliable. It's a pretty card. Do I need to keep this? There's nothing written on it. I mean, I know that I have awards and little pins and all from when he worked there, so do I need to keep this? I like the picture, so I don't know. I have no date on when this was sent. It says 1833, but that's when this image was painted. This is probably from the 40s or 50s, I would think. Probably the 50s, when he worked there as a draftsman. But I keep it because it's considered ephemera. What do you do with cards? Normally you get cards, Christmas cards. Do you keep them forever? No, you toss them eventually. You can't save them all unless they're from like really close family. If they're from a casual friend, as soon as Christmas is done, you chuck it, I don't, especially if it's got glitter. I hate glitter. I don't want that glitter everywhere. So in the environment and degradation area, temperature. So 40 to 50 degrees is perfectly fine that's optimal. But if the temperature is comfortable for you, that's okay. So that's common sense environmental things. Humidity, too high or too low can be disastrous. The key for humidity is 30 to 50% relative humidity. It's perfect. Most homes are around 50, 55, 65. That's okay too. But when you get to 70 plus, you're getting into mold environment for humidity's sake. Light, darkness is key because UV lighting is not very great for anything, especially for Polaroids. Polaroids are notorious for changing color and just becoming, the best thing you can do for a Polaroid is scan it in immediately because it's just going to keep changing. Eventually it's going to fade. Pollution. Smoke and fumes, any particulates in the air must be avoided. That's very easy to do. Pests, silverfish, roaches, mice and rats and other creatures can physically damage material. Isolate items, so if you're dealing with a box of stuff and you bring it in from the garage to your house, be careful because it's probably got silverfish. They will live forever, or they'll just keep coming in there. Hopefully there's no mice or rats or roaches. There are other pests too. If you have fabric items with wool and silk, there's those silk moths or carpet bugs that can be brought in. Anything that has active pests, you want to isolate that and hopefully they just leave or die on their own. Mold is a problem. It's a big problem. High humidity environments can cause mold. Keeping an item dry and cool limits, and some can be brushed away, but once an item is molded, it's considered contaminated and must be processed. So let's say this is mold. It could be mold growth, but it's not. If it was mildew. If it is mildewed, you need to isolate this, put it in some plastic, and keep it away from touching other things. Because once mold grows on something, it's considered completely contaminated. Think of it as radioactive. You don't want it near anything. The best thing I can do to mitigate mold is use one of our handy dandy brushes. Like I'm sure you have some makeup brushes that are cheap that somebody gave you and you're not going to use them. That's good enough. You just brush, which loosens up a lot of the mold on there, the spores, and you're just brushing the surface. This can be used for negatives or photos, but if something's really dirty, do not keep using them over and over again on the same thing. Gloves, there's two ways to think about gloves. It used to be you need to handle things with gloves. The current thinking in archival studies is use your hands. Gloves it limits your dexterity and you can actually damage material because you can't feel it as the best way you can. There's a little hand washing thing there. Wash your hands. No food or drinks around material when you're dealing with it because you could spill. Even though I have a drink there, I have it way over there. Wash your hands every 20 minutes or so, or if they get dirty with working with ink or something. The best tool you have are your hands. But don't use lotion. Wash that stuff off. Don't use hand sanitizer. Wash your hands, thoroughly dry them. Make sure they're really dry. Every 20 minutes or so, you're going to start sweating. Oil's going to start coming up on your fingers. So you need to just abandon what you're doing, wash your hands, dry them, come back to the material. So if you're working with it all day long and you're not washing your hands, you're cross-contaminating material. Not just mold spores or whatever, with your own sweat. So that's kind of being kind of picky for every 20 minutes, but if you're really concerned about it, every 20 minutes. If you're not concerned with it, just be aware that your hands are sweaty and getting oily. I rarely ever use cotton gloves for handling material. I really don't. Only if I was handling like a Chagall lithograph or a Dali that's been signed or something, but I have to wear those. Anything artsy or worth money that's been appraised, I would probably wear those. But most of the time you don't even get to touch those things. But mold think of it as radioactivity. Mold stays alive, inert, forever and ever. I mean, so all it takes is a little bit of moisture and a little bit of warmth, and next thing you know, you got mushrooms and mold and stuff sprouting out of things. Mold loves paper. It's just a great environment for it to take a root and put its little mycelia through the paper, and does it destroy it? Absolutely. It starts to speed up decay. So there's some more bugs. I've seen these, woolly bear and wool and silk. There's the biscuit beetle, which is what you see if you have flour that has that in there. There's another carpet beetle that kind of turns into that. This is a furniture beetle. I don't think I've ever seen that. Webbing clothes moth, that's what that is. That will eat holes into things. You think mothballs, you think that. Mothballs are awful for preserving stuff. It's best to use cedar because it doesn't leave chemicals in there, and mothballs are pretty bad for you anyway. So here's some things that we use in the library world for preservation material, and you don't have to get too fancy. So acid-free is key, and no PVC. PVC it lets off a gas as it breaks down. So poly bags, I get them on Amazon. The comic book industry and the trading card industry has really pushed archival standards to collectability and all that, so there's a ton of stuff. Glassine is pretty common as far as material. When you check out a library book and it has a dust jacket with a cover on it, that plastic cover is made out of glassine. It is acid-free. PVC and the paper is acid-free. Unbleached cotton twill, cord, or string. Unbleached cotton is great. Usually to tie things or wrap around things to keep them kind of bundled. A small spatula. These are awesome. I love this. It's meant for scientific use for measuring stuff and stirring, but what this does is it will gently pull up anything that's stapled. A lot of staples will rust. Here's an example of someone paper clipped these, and it rusted, and it also corroded, so it left marks on the back of the pictures, and it also dented them, and there's no way I can fix that, even on the front. The other thing is, when you're handling photos, handle them by the edge if you're just to be sure that you're not smudging them. Same thing with definitely negatives, because negatives can react with the moisture in your fingers. So handle by the edge, it's always the best. If you cannot handle something by the edge, if it's really fragile, what you can do is, I will show you because I do love to show this. So you take a folder, this is a fine folder, and you can scoop it up and examine it that way if you're having trouble with dexterity. It's an easy way to handle stuff. Scoop it up with a piece of cardboard or something, a thin cardstock piece. Scoop it up, look at it. You can also flip it over, because most of the time when you're dealing with old photos, they don't lay flat. They curve, they do whatever, they do their own thing. This is a blower. This is great for negatives. It looks like the thing you suck a baby's snot out of their head, but it just gets the air and blows on it. And a brush. Here's a little brush. This is for camera lenses, but I keep it in a little sleeve just to keep it away from things. This is great for also picking apart rubber bands that have stuck to stuff. A lot of times when you're dealing with stuff people have saved, collected, rubber bands are awful. They usually, in a year or so, they usually break down, but they will also stick, and this will help scrape them off because it's kind of tapered at the end. But this is a very useful tool. I love this tool. You can get it on Amazon or wherever for like $3. So small spatula, that's what I have. Acid-free tissue paper. Most tissue paper nowadays is acid-free. That's great for wrapping up fragile things. Maybe you have like a wedding cake topper that you want to save that was your parents'. Acid-free folders, that's great for organizing things. Acid-free paper, most standard paper is acid-free nowadays. Storage boxes, which I talked about. Paper featuring alkaline buffers, alkaline buffers are mainly for newspaper clippings and newspaper articles. But they can be used just regular. Mulberry document tape is great if you, the last class somebody brought in baptismal certificates that were like this big, and they were actually engravings from Currier and Ives and hand colored, which was really cool to see. But they had started to tear, and they were from the 1800s. I suggested getting mulberry document tape. Mulberry plant fibers are acid-free, and the tackiness, it's meant to, anything when you're doing preservation or conservation, when you conserve something, it can be reversed. So mulberry tape can be taken off if need be, but it will keep the tears and the brittle paper from tearing across. Polyester sheets are a little advanced. Basically, it's just to separate things. It's polyester, a stiff polyester material, and distilled water. Whenever we've had to clean something, distilled water is best, not purified water. There's a difference. Distilled water is just water. Purified water means it's been, there's still elements in there. But distilled water, if I had to clean microfiche or microfilm because it was dusty, I could use that. If you need to wipe something off and you're not sure, maybe you need to, mouse droppings and mouse urine has gotten on something and you want to kind of clean it the best you can. Don't use Windex. I've done that before. That's not good. Use distilled water is best, and use as minimal as you need to. And usually it's like blot. Don't smear, just kind of blot. But that's a little advanced, but sometimes you do need to clean stuff. This website, Dick Blick, is an artist website for material and also archival stuff. They have an amazing supply of things. It says archival tape, markers, archival boxes. It's a supply company we've used before in the library, and it is awesome. They have a lot of office things and art supplies, but I like them a lot, and you get really exactly what you're looking at. So here's some further going into what dealing with things. So documents, clean hands. Sometimes you need weights if they're rolled up. A clean brush, being aware of damage, so be aware of things chipping. Sometimes you unroll it and pieces fall off. Well, once those pieces fall off, little edges, you don't usually just throw them away, but what if a whole piece breaks off? What do? You have to keep it together. Hopefully you can keep it flat. There is a way you can unroll things and have them permanently stay flat using something called a humidity chamber, which is actually fairly easy to do, but it's a little advanced. Scanning, if the item is delicate, please be aware of what type of scanner you'll use. If it's something that's rolled up and very brittle, we have an overhead scanner that can scan it. But you know what? You have a scanner yourself. It's called the camera in your phone. That's a scanner. You can scan 3D objects with it just by taking a picture, preserve things with just a picture, and there's a lot of apps that will allow you to clean up. If I take a picture of this letter, it will actually brighten the color up and all, so you could read it a little bit better, and you'd have a copy of it for preservation's sake. Storing, you want to store stuff unrolled and flat. Things can be kept in folders or sleeves. So these little page protectors are awesome for things like this. Most letters you're dealing with are letter size. This paper has sort of a linen, I think it's cotton, but it's not 100% cotton. 100% cotton paper is awesome, but this is yellowed too much, and there are some brown. If you look, there's some brown on there. That's called foxing. That's where it's gotten some humidity has reacted with the paper. Wherever you see it darkening, it's becoming more brittle. The paper, the lignin paper fibers are becoming problematic. Here's a letter from 1938, my great-grandmother. She was writing it to my great-grandfather. They like to write letters. It's been damaged pretty badly. Where it's been folded, there's holes in it. It's gotten wet, and the ink has run. I can pretty much read this, but yeah, you can see where it's really changing color. It's still pliable. It's not terribly brittle, but the page protector is best for that. It's keeping oxygen pretty much away from it, as well as humidity, and this is non-PVC protective. So photographs. I've had so many photographs I've had to deal with. So separate, brush the front and back, because a lot of times there's dust or whatever on them. Assess any damage, like this. The paper clip was on here. They were bent. I've removed the corroded paper clip. I can discard that, but now I'm left with maybe possible rust. I would need to brush that away as best as possible, because if it stuck to the paper, that could tear. So I'm brushing it. Let's see. Organized by type or event or person, it's kind of helpful. It's okay to write on pencil on the back of photos. That's perfectly fine. That's an archival thing. You can do that. Just don't use a pen, and press gently. Do not push on there. So use a nice, just regular pencil. 300 dots per inch is the standard for archival purposes. For scanning, that's the native size, usually a little bit larger. If you scan any higher than 300 dpi, you're actually enlarging it. You're not doing anything as far as quality. Once an item is scanned, it's up to you if you want to discard it. Storing. This is kind of hard. It's actually advised that you keep individual photos separate. But my rule is, if it's something special, which, let me show you something. This is some family member I'm related to. His name is Uncle Les. That's all I know. So I digitized this. All I did was scan it. It's a cabinet card, a cabinet photo. And we have, whenever you see the brown here, there's brown spots, you think humidity, it's reacting with the paper. Before this, there were 10 types. There were daguerreotypes as far as photos. So this is a old school photo. I don't know how old he is. On the back, someone wrote in pen, Uncle Les, L-E-S. I have no idea who he is. I know he's on my mother's side of the family. I'm related to him in some way, shape, or form. So what I can tell from this is it was in a studio, photographer studio. Usually these were, where you would pose like that. They would dress you up. Sometimes they were not your clothes. They put the clothes on you, because not everybody could afford everything. As I digitized this, I noticed something. He looks pretty young, but there's something on his finger. He's married. He looks like he's like 20 years old, if that, and he's married pretty young. Handsome man, he's all dressed up, not really smiling, but there's a lot of damage to this. There's damage there, there's stuff like that. So if I was to take this into Photoshop, which I have before with photos, clean them up, I'm not really doing anything for the photo, it'd only be just for fun, but maybe I wanted to frame this or something. Rule of thumb, if you love your family and you have all these beautiful old photos of them, the best advice is don't put the originals in frames. Make copies of them, put the copy in a frame, because UV light will fade, especially older photos. The chemicals mess them up. Make a copy of it. Save the original somewhere else. It's almost like you have a 10-carat diamond ring. Do you really want to wear that walking around downtown Newport News? I don't think you want to do that. Wear a copy so that when it gets stolen, you still have your original. So you have this lovely, I have this lovely photo. It's stored. This photo I have in a protective sleeve. Other photos like these, this is from the 90s. No, I don't have this on protective sleeve. And in fact, once I digitized mine from the 90s, I threw them away because I didn't need them anymore. But this one, since this one's special, I don't know how many of him exist, and I really don't have. All I know is he's related to me. You know, I want to keep it, and I want to arrest the humidity damage that's occurring. I can't reverse it, but I can at least stop and arrest that footage. Here's another photo. This is my great-grandmother Florence Hayes, taken in Portsmouth, and I believe this was Easter Sunday, and this was a Polaroid land camera that took this. So when you have a photo and you're like, oh, I don't know much about this. Well, I know it was Easter. She has a lovely corsage. This was before or after church. Obviously the sun's out, she's got a shadow. But look, she had State Farm insurance. I didn't know that. I know this is her car, but State Farm insurance. And I don't know enough about cars, but I believe it's a Chevrolet CH and it ends with a T. I guess I could look up what type of car that is. Because I know it's the 70s, it's probably from the 60s or 70s. Cool looking lights. I mean, it's kind of cool with a bumper. It looks like it's in a garage and she's standing by the car. But the color in this Polaroid has started to, it looks very warm. It's reddish orange, and I'm sure she was wearing a red wool outfit, or polyester. That was the thing, polyester. So, you know, I could try to fix the colors, but really the best thing for me is to scan this because the colors are changing. Polaroids were, you know, instant things that would develop. They weren't really meant for long life. And so storing, store photographs flat and stack horizontally. Don't press or overfill a box. When we have these archival boxes, usually the material we put in there, it's still loose so we can get it. If you start to pack it in there, you may damage things, you may smush things, you may bend things, so be careful with that. Storing in acid-free paper or poly bags is okay to keep collections separate. Special care regarding light should be considered for prints before 1965. 1965 was an important year because chemicals, people started to think about longevity of photos. So anything before 1965 photos, those are problematic. I believe these are from the 50s and were taken with a Kodak Brownie camera, 128 size film, which they don't even make anymore. And they have those decorative edges. Sometimes these would come in little books and you could tear them off. I've seen some of those, so sometimes you'll see perforations on the side because that's how they came. But they have this like decorative scalloped border. That was just how they were printed. Sometimes there's a date, it will say like March 1954 or something. I've seen those. These do not have that. But those are from the 50s. I need to scan those because even without light, the chemicals may still react to things. When you're working with negatives, identify the type of negative, digitize if able, and store in poly or PVC protectors. So here's some negatives I have. Always handle negatives from the edges. Try not to handle the front because there is some chemical emulsion on there. Usually you'll see a shiny side and you'll see a dull side. This one is of my great uncle when he was a baby, probably 128 millimeter film, and this has damage, so I don't care about handling it properly. You can see it's probably moisture, it could be someone coughing on it, who knows. This was in an attic for years, but I have the original, I have the photo of this, so I'm not too worried about it. When you encounter, a lot of people would save the negatives with the photos. Do you really need to keep the negatives if the photos are fine? You really don't. They take up space and they're very easily damaged by scratching and also moisture. So be aware of that. Even if you were so if you have negatives and you have the photo and the photo looks great, if you scan this in, you'll find that the image has faded quite a bit. And it's as negatives are awful as far as preserving material, photographic material. If there's any fasteners or staples, paper clips or rubber bands, remove them and discard. Stainless staples can be used to replace old staples. Almost all staples now are stainless steel. People that are comic book collectors, a lot of times they'll get older ones. It's actually okay to take the old corroded staple out and replace it with a new one because they can just keep corroding and actually mess up the paper. Does anyone have any questions? Just kind of going through the basics. This page is found through the library's Media Center page. is through our LibGuide. So if you go to the library and then LibGuides, type in archives, you'll find a lot of stuff. I have a ton of links here. I don't just make all this stuff up. This is stuff that is great. I reference the National Archives. The Northeast Document Conservation Center is awesome. They have free resources for learning. I've brushed up on some things there. Smithsonian Institute, there's a glossary. I love to have terms defined to make sure that's how we talk to each other. And there's also some ebooks we have here in the library. A history of archival practice, preserving archives, digital curation projects made easy, online documents, caring for photos, this one I recommend, handling archival documents and manuscripts. I also do that one. That one's a great one too. Naming schemes, scanning. So this tells you a little about what scanners we have. Here's some more stuff about paper. More than you want to know even about paper. Even more links. So these are ones I personally found. I did not copy these from anywhere. These are ones that I have gone to for advice and for keeping up on things. Conservograms is awesome. It's meant for museums, but it talks about paper. It talks about maybe you have a stash of arrowheads. It talks about the best way to take care of those. My professor, when I was in grad school at University of Pittsburgh, he was the editor-in-chief of the Society of American Archivists, their journal. And he wrote a ton of books, like 10 books, all about archives. And like, how can you write 10 books on archives? But that was what he did. He was a stickler. He knew his stuff. Very smart man, but wow. I learned quite a bit from him, but he was very hard, very difficult. He was very concentrated on theory rather than, practice, because he thought you really needed to have a grasp of the whole idea of things. So what do we do in the Media Center? A lot of people have home movies that are on VHS tape. We have converters that convert it to a digital file or to a disc. If you want to send stuff out, I recommend Southtree. They're awesome. They're actually having a sale right now when I last clicked on that. A lot of places will charge a lot of money. There's like Kodak, and there's some other ones that are advertised. They know what they're doing, and there's no frills, and they are very economical. I think it's like $10 for a VHS tape to digitize it. Everything is in real time, so when you digitize old stuff, you have to watch it in real time. It's not like you push a button and it's done. We also have an 8mm, Super 8mm converter that we got last year to convert some stuff. So I've done some of that for some faculty. Some of this is in-house use only. You can't check it out, but we do have DVD VHS converters that can be checked out. We have some portable scanners that can be checked out. But people have asked me where they can send $7.50 for each tape. This does tapes, photos, film, and audio. I recommend this site to faculty who have stuff they would need to preserve if it's on cassettes. They do an awesome job. I've heard nothing bad about this company, and they probably have some of the best prices I've seen. They do such a good job, so I can't recommend them enough. And right now they're having this awesome sale. They're always having a sale though. And you can put stuff in a box, send it off, and they'll send it back to you. I really, look, it does look like it's running out. 3 hours, 59 minutes, and it's counting down. But I do recommend those. Hey.
Question. So I have a lot of yearbooks and big albums from back in the 80s or so, and I store them in like rubber tubs, and you said don't use the plastic tubs. Is there a recommendation for a fair amount of high quality storage or something like that?
Usually for books, you don't need to put them in boxes. You can put them on shelves. But if you don't have the shelf space, storing books in tubs is great as long as they're stacked and not all over the place, because they can fall against each other, bend. Plastic containers, as long as it's sealed, we want the top to seal on it, like for the most part, clamp down on it, so that things can't get in there, because silverfish, love books, especially if they're not moved around all the time.
About the chemicals or whatever.
Yeah,
Destroys-
I wouldn't worry about that, because for books, when they're closed, very little oxygen can get there, so don't worry about that. The most that you could have, well, especially for yearbooks are notorious about having cute covers with like plastic, and some of them are like plush, and theirs are going to break down. But the contents are what you're worried about. So as long as it's closed, the humidity is low, it's kept in a temperature-controlled environment, it's perfectly fine. But I've had problems where I've stored books and they've shifted, and now I have a bent book that I have to like mush. So just be aware of that. But if they're hardcover, yeah, they're fine. Just make sure it's not overpacked, and it's not in the garage or the attic. Are there any questions? I went over a lot of stuff, but one of the things I always want to do is just say, hey, we're the media center, and if you ever need any equipment, your staff, you can check stuff out. Our video recorders, like I'm using one now, it's just recording me, not you, and I have a wireless mic on, so it's recording my voice. We have a ton of stuff. If you ever need to check out a DSLR camera, a mirrorless camera, a GoPro, handheld audio items, this is what students check out. Faculty and staff can check these out too. We have a lot of stuff. We're always getting new stuff. So if you ever have a need, please think of us, because we like to see our stuff used. And I also have lots of, let me go back to help material, our guides, free multimedia content using InDesign, video editing, training documentation for other stuff, Photoshop, Adobe Acrobat, digital humanities resources, things like that. Those are in-house documents that we've created. So we have stuff there that you can look at. There's me, Johnny Gray, and there's my coworker Lamar. He's the one that sort of runs the media center. I supervise him. I also supervise interlibrary loan. I do a bunch of stuff here. One of the cool things that's coming out that you don't know about is this board here is, I'm the project manager for our new library system. So in January, we'll have a brand new library catalog system, which will be pretty nice and slick and be very modern. So I'm excited about that. That's my summer project, to work with my teams and get that up and running. That's what's keeping me a little bit busy during the summer, watching all the training stuff and talking to Ex Libris, the company we're getting our product from. Yeah, that's about it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks for
thank you.
coming. I appreciate it, and I'll have some more sessions in the coming weeks, like on Photoshop or video editing, or I don't know, just whatever I feel like. I love sharing what I know, and especially when it relates to the library and what we have and how you can use it.